Many of the world's greatest stories begin with a journey, a quest to answer life's most intimate questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? From the dawn of time, all cultures have created stories to help explain the ultimate nature of things. And perhaps a new story is emerging in our time, one grounded in contemporary science and yet nourished by the ancient religious wisdom of our planet. What if the universe, even the Earth itself, has its own unique story to tell, one in which we play a profound role? We're on the Greek island of Samos, just a mile off the coast of Turkey. We could tell the story of the universe anywhere. Each place would offer its own unique possibilities for the telling. But we chose Samos because it's one of the great crossroads of human history. Europeans, Asians, and Africans have all made their way here. And by telling the story on an island surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea, we will be reminded that we live on this shining planet, sailing through the great ocean of the universe. And there's another reason we have come to Samos, and that is because 2,600 years ago, Pythagoras was born here. Pythagoras, a mathematician and philosopher, was one of the first humans to realize that the harmonies and relationships in the universe could be given expression using numbers. The current of thought he generated led eventually to all of modern mathematical science. He was also a great teacher. In fact, legend has it that he invented the word philosophy, a love of wisdom. We'll spend a day here on Samos. Before the clock strikes midnight, we will have recounted the great events of our 14 billion year cosmic evolution. Our immense journey told in a single day on one of Earth's magical islands. How did it all start? An awesome question, certainly. But it appears there really was a beginning. Some scientists refer to this as the Big Bang. I like to call it the Great Flaring Forth. Imagine the universe beginning like this. "14 billion years ago, everything in the universe, all the bright matter of the stars and galaxies, as well as all the dark matter no one has ever seen, all of it existed in a single point, so energetic it was trillions of degrees hot. Instantly, this micro-universe rushed apart, even faster than the speed of light. The discovery that the universe has expanded and is still expanding is one of the greatest of human history. The common understanding had been that the universe is simply a vast space in which things existed. Large things like galaxies and small things like atoms. Scientists knew that matter changed form in the universe, but everyone assumed that the universe as a whole was not changing. But no. The universe is changing, and has changed dramatically. The universe has a story, a beginning, a middle where we are now, and perhaps in some far distant future, an end. In the 1920s, the cosmologist Edwin Hubble trained his 100-inch telescope at the night sky. He was trying to determine if our Milky Way was the only galaxy in the universe. Not only did he discover the universe is filled with galaxies, he also determined that all of them are rushing away from each other. With Hubble's work, humanity learned that the universe began with a massive explosion that has been carrying the galaxies apart for billions of years. Another special quality about the universe is the rate of expansion. If the rate of expansion had been slower, even slightly slower, even a millionth of a percent slower, the universe would have recollapsed immediately. That would have been it. After 1 million years, the universe would have imploded upon itself and formed a massive black hole. On the other hand, if the universe had expanded a little more quickly, even slightly more quickly, even, calculations show, 1/1,000,000% more quickly, the universe would have expanded too quickly for structures to form. It would have simply exploded. There would have been no galaxies, no structure, no life, nothing but dust for all time. So what we've discovered is that we're living in a universe that is expanding at exactly the rate necessary for life and structure to come forth. It could be then that even though we can't call the early universe alive, we can understand it as life-generating. One of the physicists who is reflecting on this is the celebrated Freeman Dyson. And he mused that the more he reflected on the structures of the early universe, the more he became convinced that in some sense, the universe must have known from the very beginning that life was coming. The light from the beginning of time has been traveling for 14 billion years. Meanwhile, life has been evolving. With the recent emergence of advanced technology, we are at last able to see the story these photons tell about the birth of the universe and where we ultimately come from. Morning on a Greek island is like the first day of creation. And wandering around here, you feel like the first person. Inevitably, humans would ask, what gave birth to all of this beauty? What was the form of creativity that brought this forth? Consider galaxies. What brought the galaxies forth? You know, even a century ago, this is hard to imagine. We didn't know if there were 2 galaxies in the entire universe. That was a main focus of attention among scientists. Now we know there are 100 billion, maybe even 1 trillion galaxies. What is the creativity that brought forth 1 trillion galaxies? Let's consider our own Milky Way galaxy. It's a galaxy with huge spiral arms. Now, when we first began to discover galaxies, we thought maybe these spiral arms were composed of physical matter, but actually it's much more interesting. The arms are actually waves that are passing through the galaxy. They're called density waves, and as they pass through clouds of hydrogen and helium, they ignite star birth. That's the way to picture the Milky Way galaxy, not so much as a thing, but rather as an activity. It's an ongoing activity of bringing forth stars. We live in the midst of this intense creativity. Come into this little church. I want to show you something. The ceiling, as you can see, is filled with stars. The same is true of most of the churches on the island of Samos. The ancient Greeks, like Pythagoras, thought the stars were alive, even divine. Throughout history, every culture has been stunned by the presence of stars in the vastness of the night sky. So deeply moved by the majesty emanating from the brilliance of the stars, we have built our lives around them. We've even organized entire civilizations upon their beauty and order. Here's the essence of the universe story. The stars are our ancestors. Out of them, everything comes forth. Stars are dynamic entities. They're born, they develop, they even die. Star birth occurs when gravity squeezes together a cloud of atoms so tightly that nuclear fusion ignites in the center. In the process, hydrogen fuses into helium. This nuclear energy expands outwards and opposes gravity. So stars represent an amazingly creative balance between the powers of gravitational collapse and nuclear explosion. And once a star's nuclear fuel is spent, there's nothing left to prevent gravity from collapsing inwards, causing the death spiral to begin. This super concentrated dot of matter, which we call a supernova, explodes outward with the power of 100 billion stars. And as it expands, it creates all of the elements: phosphorus, oxygen, carbon, gold. These are spewed out into the Milky Way galaxy, and then the whole process starts again. They drift as a cloud, and then they collapse, give birth to a star, the Earth. It's by this stupendous process that we can say the stars are our ancestors. It's just such an amazing discovery. The carbon atoms of this beet and of the lettuce and of, our brains, our skin, all of it passed through an intense explosion of a star. In pondering the source of the sun's power, we can now reflect on something no earlier humans could know. The sun is converting 4 million tons of its mass into energy every second. All of life feeds on the roaring energy of the sun. Our solar system then is a self-energizing womb of creativity. And all of this had its start in a cloud of dust. It was really difficult for humans to realize that we live on a planet circling a star. I mean, we were here for hundreds of thousands of years before Aristarchus, 2,000 years ago, right here on Samos, realized we are spinning around the sun. That was such an amazing insight that it vanished, actually. And it wasn't until Copernicus discovered it again in the 16th century that humans really began to absorb the fact that we were on this planet. Let me use these vegetables to explain our solar system. So here we have the sun, this cabbage as the sun. Now, actually, if this were to be in scale, this cabbage would have to be 1 million times the size of this pepper. Budgetary considerations made that impossible, so you just have to use your imagination. Now, what we've learned in the 20th century is about the composition of the planets. First, we have the large planets. So we have Jupiter here, and we have Saturn and Uranus and Neptune. These are large enough to hold on to all the lighter elements so that they actually are gaseous. Too small to be a star, but yet too large to be solid. The other kind, then, we have indicated here with these rocks. So we have Mercury, then we have Venus. We jump over to Mars. These are the rocky planets, most of which are solid. But there's one special rocky planet, one that's not too small and not too big, one that's not too hot and not too cold, one that's not exactly solid, but not exactly liquid. We call it home. Earth is very much like an egg. The core of the Earth is like the yolk, the mantle of the Earth is like the egg white, and the crust of the Earth is like the egg shell. What happens is that early on, when the Earth is in a molten state, all of the really heavy elements like iron and nickel sink into the core. And then the elements like magnesium form this outer layer around the core, the mantle. The crust is only 10 to 50 miles thick, and that's the only solid part of Earth. All the rest is in motion. Plumes of molten rock will rise up from the mantle and harden into plates that form the crust. As these plates slide around the surface of Earth, they collide and crumple into majestic mountain ranges, or they are forced back down where they melt and sink toward the center of Earth. This discovery, which originated with Alfred Wegener, is called plate tectonics and is one of the greatest of history. Earth became encircled by great tidal oceans and held by a thin layer of atmosphere. A churning, volcanic Earth could now bring forth the next wonder of existence, the living cell. How are we going to tell the story of life? How did it all begin? What theory shall we offer to explain this? The simple truth is that no one knows with full certainty. But even though the detailed explanation still eludes us, scientists have begun to approach the whole question of life from a radical new perspective, that of self-organization. You see, during the modern period, we thought of the world as machine-like, and then life was an accident. But now, with the work of a number of chemists, notably Ilya Prigogine, who won a Nobel Prize for this work, we are beginning to discover the active patterning in matter itself. It's intrinsic to matter. From this new perspective, life is not an accident. Life is inevitable. A planet reaches a certain complexity of its matter, and then life blossoms forth, quite naturally. Consider whirlpools. This spiral, swirling action can appear anywhere, so long as there is a body of liquid moving water. It is not the water itself that endures as a spiral, because the water molecules are constantly flowing in and out of the whirlpool. It is rather the emergent dynamic structure that endures. Such is the nature of life. The universe began as a great outpouring of cosmic breath, cosmic energy, that then swirled and twisted and complexified until it could burst forth into flowers and animals and fish and all of these elegant explosions of energy. But it's not just energy, and it's not just living energy. This is energy that is aware. By awareness or sentience, we mean something that is more than what takes place in the realm of elementary particles, and yet less than full human consciousness. So, where does such awareness arise? Some biologists are beginning to speculate that awareness has its foundation in the very self-organizing dynamics of the universe. For cell biologist Ursula Goodenough, this awareness is a kind of primitive discernment, and it reveals itself especially in the membrane of each cell, that thin, skin-like layer that covers every cell. If we had a microscope for eyes, we could see it all happening right here in these tide pools. There are millions of cells are swarming about, and they're encountering molecules over and over again, and with every encounter, discernment emerges. Why? Because a decision has to be made, an intelligent decision. Now, up on the cliff over here, there's an ancient castle that will help me explain. This church, which is called Metamorphosis, is nearly 1,000 years old. Above it is a castle that once guarded entrance into the magical Potomac Valley. The castle was built to do what membranes do. Let your friends in, keep your enemies out.
The ongoing creativity of the universe is seen in the complex development of life itself.
After it had circled the sun for hundreds of millions of years, Earth's most primitive organisms developed molecules that would resonate with the sun. How are we to picture this process involving Earth and sun bringing forth photosynthesis? As an engineering project? I guess, but try a new metaphor. Imagine two lovers longing for each other. What is it they truly desire? The relationship is charged with energy and promise. There's the sun exploding with brilliance. There's the earth basking in the sun's rays. But Earth is not passive. Earth's systems attune to the sun, changing their molecular structures in order to draw in light and convert it to food.
As the complexity of life deepens, entwinement itself also deepens.
How are we going to tell the story of the living Earth? In particular, how are we going to tell the story of Earth to our children? This is especially important because in the last couple centuries, we have learned more about the Earth than in perhaps the previous 100,000 years. So the question is, how are we going to convey that, the essence of that, to the next generation? One thing is completely clear. The Earth is very different than what we thought.
The Earth is not a platform. It's not a background. In fact, the great discovery is this.
Life doesn't exist on top of the Earth. Life is a partner
To the oceans, to the atmosphere, to the land.
For instance, if we look at the atmosphere, it is 21% oxygen. This makes us unique among all the known planets. The only reason we have oxygen in our atmosphere is that life is pouring it forth each day. So the very composition of our air reflects the fact that life is here. In that sense, life is woven into the atmosphere. But an even more radical hypothesis is beginning to emerge in the minds of some scientists. Perhaps Earth is not only an integrated system. Perhaps Earth somehow maintains itself so that life can flourish. Consider temperature. Life only exists in a very narrow band of temperature. So something like this temperature has been true of Earth for 4 billion years. Now, scientists originally thought this was because the Earth just happened to be 93 million miles away from the sun. But during the 1950s, we learned about the fusion processes taking place in stars. And so now we know the sun's temperature has increased by over 25% over the last 4 billion years. Which means, somehow, Earth has had to adapt itself to maintain that stable, narrow band of temperature. How? We know some of the details. Early Earth had 1,000 times the carbon dioxide as present-day Earth. So during that time, The Earth's system has drawn the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, forming, for instance, the shells of marine algae. And then when the marine algae die, the shells go to the bottom of the ocean. So more and more carbon dioxide is taken out of the atmosphere, which enables the Earth to cool down while the sun heats up. But the question returns, is all of this being organized by the Earth as a whole so that life could flourish? If that's the case, then the atmosphere is not just stuff. It's something like
A membrane. And we are not living on an Earth, we are actually participants in a vast, intricate system that is something like a living cell. A living cell has the power to learn through time. This is what distinguishes the first cells from all the other beings that existed prior to life's emergence. A star, for instance, has the power to organize itself for billions of years, but throughout that time it never needs to learn anything new. Life learns, for life can adapt itself to new situations by changing its form and by remembering these changes. Life remembers the past by storing information in its DNA molecules. It is this power of memory encased in each living cell that enables life to learn and thus evolve. One of the ways in which to understand the nature of life's memory is by using the ideas of the mathematician and philosopher Pythagoras. You know, a number of Pythagoras' ideas were revolutionary. And like a lot of revolutionary ideas, they weren't that popular. In fact, Pythagoras had to hide from the tyrant Polycrates, who was in charge of Samos. And tradition has it, this is where he hid, right here, halfway up the mountain, in the cave there. One of Pythagoras' central convictions was that the essence of life is not air or water or fire as the other Greek philosophers taught. Rather, the essence of life is number, pattern. It seems such an odd idea. I mean, life is so sensuous, it's so complex, so rich. How can the essence of that be something abstract like number or pattern? It is precisely this deep connection between life and pattern that enables life to remember its crucial achievements. That's what DNA does. In the precise sequence of the nucleotides, DNA holds the essence of life. Life did not hand down the actual molecules to my body. Instead, life handed their essence in the form of genetic information. Because of this, our bodies can come alive 1,000 different ways each day. Life has learned to learn. One of the central ways of learning for our species involves seeing. Life has invented so many different ways of seeing. The amazing thing is, this process is not yet over. Come with me into Pythagoras' cave. Beginning billions of years ago, the earliest cells began to develop a sensitivity to light. They could sense it and move toward it. And it was this capacity that led eventually to the development of the eye. Now, the first eye for which we have any fossil evidence is that of the trilobite, 500 million years ago. The trilobite, intent upon piercing through the darkness, invented an eye using calcite, a mineral. The trilobite was able to see only in the direction of these rods. A primal form of seeing that proved so successful, we find it even now in the compound eyes of flies and lobsters. An entirely different form of seeing was invented by the worms, and carried forward by the fish. This type of eye is the one we know best, for it's the one we inherited, the water-based eye.
Even after 500 million years, eyesight continues to evolve. In humans, the power of seeing deepens with a new kind of sight, insight. We see on the inner screen of our imaginations. Life has learned yet another way of seeing, one with the power to transform everything.
With this new way of seeing, we find ourselves blinking in a thrilling and yet unsettling light. Rooted in the center of immensities, we open our eyes and see each thing anew, each thing ablaze with a cosmic creativity, billions of years old. With the insights made possible with conscious self-awareness, our vision now extends back through billions of years of evolution. We see not only the scurrying spider, but the entire cosmic journey layered into the spider's body, including even the distant stars, out of whose explosions its molecules were constructed. And this capacity to see into the depths of time gives new meaning to death. The universe throughout space and time is filled with violence and chaos. Millions of galaxies have been destroyed. Trillions of animals have been killed. Death and suffering are woven into the very heart of the universe. Usually, such destruction is massive and senseless. A volcano erupts and kills every living being in its vicinity. But it can also happen that dealing with death leads to more complex, coevolutionary relationships. For a rabbit, an eagle wears the face of destruction. But in this relationship, the eagle develops more acute eyesight, and the rabbit develops greater speed for escape. Interdependent communities arise out of suffering and death. The ultimate meaning of this escapes easy explanation. We are confronted with a fundamental mystery in which the small self of the individual dives into and nourishes the whole community. But living beings are not just linked together by food.
Passion, our urge to merge. What could be more intimate to our souls? Our passions determine so much of our lives. They are the wild, explosive energies of all of love and creativity. And such desire resides at the very center of life.
With fish, the female deposits her eggs, and the male later fertilizes them. There's no contact between them. 100 million years later, when the lizards have evolved out of their fish and amphibian ancestors, the passion to merge has deepened considerably. With mammals and birds, passions reach yet a new crescendo. Not only are they able to commingle as one body, they can become so profoundly bonded they remain in a relationship their entire lives. We are not just similar to animals, we have been shaped by them. Our passions come from vertebrate evolution. Even our compassion can be understood as an expansion of what took place hundreds of millions of years ago in the ocean with the early fish. Biologists speculate that mutations led to a mother fish who scared away predators from her babies. This behavior was new at that time. What was more common among fish back then was a mother who ate her young. With the emergence of the fish's descendants, mammals and birds, maternal care broadened. Now the offspring were not just protected from predators, but were nourished directly by their mother. This care even included transmission of survival information of their group. And in some cases, this required years of training. We see then the caring behavior among vertebrates expanded for 500 million years before the emergence of Homo sapiens. Earlier humans intuited this deepening compassion and celebrated it with images of the divine feminine. As we enter into evening here on Samos, we approach one of the deep mysteries at the center of every traditional cosmic story: the nature and ultimate meaning of the human. We humans have our origin in the birth of the universe 14 billion years ago, and thus we are composed of the same energy and quanta as that which composes everything in the universe. And we follow from the first cell, emerging 4 billion years ago. So we're genetic cousins to every living being. So what is distinct about us? What is uniquely human? Our current best evidence suggests that something took place between 6 and 7 million years ago in Africa. Something happened to ignite the human lineage in the primate world. A new line of energetic apes emerged that would, over several million years, bring forth massive brains and learn to dwell in a world saturated with dreams. Nothing like them had ever existed before. So, what gave rise to us? We don't really know. We don't have the detailed knowledge of that transformation yet. We're forced to speculate on the data. And perhaps that's entirely appropriate here in the night, to be forced to dream about the origins of this dream-making animal. One theory offered by the scientists is particularly fascinating. It suggests that humanity had its origin in the prolongation of childhood. The idea is that mutations took place, which slowed down our development. Humans went through the same phases as, say, the chimpanzees, but they remained in each stage for a longer period of time. In particular, this meant that the humans were childlike for more of their lives than other mammals. So, to understand what makes a human human, we can study the children of any mammalian species. They jump to play. They explore the world with their eyes, and they taste the world with their mouths. Simple existence thrills them. Their actions are, in some sense, free. So, after nearly 4 billion years, an animal emerged that could remain free, spontaneous, curious, flexible, open, impelled to try everything. So what was going to happen now? Early humans awoke to an incandescent consciousness. But where other animals were controlled by instincts, humans were liberated from such set reactions. Captivated by the thrill of movement, we could make dance or sports central to our lives. Astonished by the sounds of earth, we could dedicate ourselves to the joy of making music. Or making love. greatest creation in human history was what enabled humans to plunge into and to share their superabundant consciousness. This new invention was language. More simply, the symbol. The symbols of language and art and mathematics opened up new depths of consciousness. Each human began to carry an entire universe within. This new form of consciousness, called symbolic consciousness, would soon change everything. A crucial step in the process of becoming human was learning to externalize consciousness, to represent in the physical world what we had experienced within. This is the Archaeological Museum on the island of Samos. Come and have a look. By creating marks on bone or in wet clay, humans invented a way to fix their knowledge into an enduring form outside of themselves. The coding processes of life were bursting beyond the DNA molecule. So with human culture, experience itself can be remembered and passed down for thousands of years. Not just successful mutations, any valuable understanding, even if experienced by a single human being, can become part of the enduring legacy. Works of the mind and spirit flowed into Samos from every direction of the ancient world, from Athens and Mesopotamia, as well as Spain, Egypt, Persia. You know, in the early universe, concentrations of matter led to the emergence of galaxies, and something similar was going on here. In Samos and in other cities, we find a concentration of symbolic constructions. What does this mean, really? It means that rare insights and deep feelings from around the planet and from different eras of time are all folded together here. Out of this powerful alchemical mixing, human consciousness complexified into new forms. Just think of it. For billions of years, rocks were just rocks. And then, in a geological instant, all over the planet, they began to appear with these scratchings on them. Even more amazing, these little marks were organizing entire civilizations. With the appearance of the human, the coding process of life burst beyond the DNA molecule and began carving its information into stone. Symbols not only enabled humans to accumulate knowledge through millennia, they also offered a final and explosive possibility for human emergence. Symbols enabled humans to concentrate their consciousness upon consciousness. This was a development with magnificent and yet unexpected consequences. Like a magnifying glass focusing the sunlight upon a leaf, symbols set fire to human possibility that had slumbered for 100,000 years. Look at this colossal form. It's almost 15 feet high. Now imagine dozens of such statues. As the Greeks moved and lived among them, their self-conceptions would be changed. They would begin to imagine they were godlike, capable of anything. Such systems we call in science self-amplifying loops. Consciousness giving birth to symbols, which then magnify consciousness. In this way, humans were not simply evolving. They were consciously participating in giving birth to themselves. And what was coming forth was a planet-altering species. For this activity was taking place not simply here on the ancient island of Samos, but actually throughout the planet, in every civilization. Supercharged with confidence coming from the reverberations of such symbols, human presence burst forth and altered the very face of the planet. Pyramids rose up from the African desert. Ancient rivers were diverted. Land as large as the eye could see was watered by irrigation systems. Even the forests scattered across the oceans in the form of sailing vessels. For the first time in Earth's history, seeds were not subject to the vagaries of climate, but received their watery nourishment with the precision and inevitability of logical thought. Soon, even the inner order of the seeds was captured by the science of genetics. What does it mean when even the seeds begin to live not just in the earth, but in an earth shaped by human consciousness? With their equations and their measurements, the early scientists discovered truths none of the classical scholars had known. In astronomy, chemistry, physiology, humans began to understand the world with their numbers and patterns. The defining characteristic of this new modern form of consciousness was the decision to employ our science and technology to control nature for our own use. The widespread conviction of the industrial world was that nature was inferior to us. Such a worldview in which only humans have sentient feelings allowed all of nature to become nothing more than a resource we could exploit in any way we wished. Even René Descartes, the most significant philosopher of the modern age, believed that when animals made crying sounds, they were not suffering, they were simply malfunctioning machines. Humans were gaining control of Earth's processes. And to what purpose? To create a better world, to eliminate hunger, to provide for our children, to have fun. And to fulfill this dream, we poured forth all of our energies, all of our technologies, and with stupendous results. In the blink of an eye, we exploded to 7 billion humans. The irony of it all. Housing and feeding this many humans has already gutted our oceans and forests. We've ended up achieving something like the opposite of what we dreamt of. It's not just that we're using up all the energies of Earth. It's much deeper than that. We're changing life's dynamics, and in an irreversible way. We're just beginning to realize that over the last few decades, we have profoundly altered the evolutionary dynamics of Earth, the air, the climate, the rivers, the oceans, even the DNA. We live on a different planet now. A planet where not biology, but symbolic consciousness is the determining factor for evolution. This great reversal has taken place. In the far distant past, life drew forth symbolic consciousness. But now symbolic consciousness has seized control of life. With our languages and our machines, we have become as powerful as the planet itself. Because of us, ice caps are melting. Because of us, coral reefs the size of mountains are bleaching white. But nothing shows this disaster more clearly than life itself. Because of us, thousands of species are going extinct each year. Nothing this devastating has taken place on Earth since the extinction of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. We are faced with a collective challenge no previous generation even contemplated. How are we to use this symbolic consciousness? to create a human presence that will enhance the well-being of the Earth community. We are beginning to understand the profound powers of the universe. And just as these powers have brought forth galaxies, stars, and life itself, perhaps the universe is now unfolding towards some new destiny. What if our ultimate destiny is to experience the universe so deeply we come to realize that we are, in some sense, the mind and heart of the universe? Our deepest yearning is for a wholehearted participation in this flourishing. As we float in the midst of such mysterious immensities, is there any deep wisdom that might help us align our consciousness with the grain of cosmic evolution? Wonder will guide us. The human species has a genius for becoming astounded by almost anything in the universe. What can this mean? The body of the universe gave birth to our bodies. The self-organizing dynamics of the universe gave birth to our minds. We belong here. We've always belonged here. These deep discoveries of science are leading to a new story of the universe. It's a story that can be summarized in a single sentence. Over the course of 14 billion years, hydrogen gas transformed itself into mountains, butterflies, the music of Bach, and you and me. And these energies coursing through us may indeed renew the face of the earth.
Well, it's an interesting thing. John can maybe start talking about the childhood.
Yes, and
And
the prolongation of childhood. It's such an interesting question, isn't it, Song Chao? The question of play and the sense that we humans remain playful so long in our life, and we know other animals also remain playful. And one interpretation that I appreciate is that the cosmic story and the larger Earth story in the cosmos remind us of this deep creativity that we have inherited from out of the universe, from all of our ancestors. And this is a deep creativity that is also very playful. And we extend our childhood in order to have the possibility of reflecting upon the change, the creative change in the universe as we play, as we enter into exchange with the universe itself. It's a really fascinating question.
yeah, I think, as John just said, play gives us the possibility of creativity because it activates our imagination. Like when we were at KFBG, we watched children who had gathered some of the soil to make pigment for painting. And it was very exciting to see what they were painting in this playful and creative way. So, the arts and music and dance and our understanding of agriculture that KFBG is so keen on as well, and plants, these are speaking to us now, right? We're about to launch a new website called Living Earth Community, which is really follows on this journey of the universe. And it's trying to say, look at plants, trees, fungi, they're communicating, animals, birds, whales, and on, the migration patterns of birds and fish and so on. Something's happening in this living Earth community that we can't fully understand, but that's part of the inspiration of wonder and awe that this film is giving us, and also this new website. And the awe drives the action because we need the human energy to make the changes that are ahead of us. Love to hear any other questions as well. It's such a good one.
Yeah, wonderful. I think this really connects with a lot of people's comments. Those who were in person at Kodori, they were sharing that how they really felt that connection with nature in that solo time and really felt this balance. And someone mentioned that there was this perfect orchestra around them. So I think this really, they were experiencing the wonder and the awe in that experience. And I'm sure many of us have felt the same during watching the film. So there's quite a bit about consciousness and about evolution. So someone asked about this part where it talks about self-amplifying consciousness and its impact on consequences. Whether you want to talk a bit more about it, when in the film it was saying that humans are creating these stories and statues, and then it amplifies us and kind of also give rise to all of these things that happened afterwards. So if you want to perhaps touch a bit on this. And then I think a follow-up question from that was, there's part of human consciousness that disrespects other life and matter, and perhaps there's a bit of an arrogance that has led to lots of destruction. And we can see that many of the participants care deeply about degradation of nature, disconnection of human and nature. Many of them are worried and asking, what can we do? So I wonder if you want to touch upon this a little bit from the consciousness perspective, and you can also go into the action. But I think this part about kind of reflecting our own consciousness is interesting.
This wonderful story perspective that we received from our teacher, Thomas Berry, that this sense now of an emergent world, a changing world, presents a story to us. And with human consciousness, we attempt to tell that story, And as one scientist, I hold his reminder that he felt there were three infinities when he encountered the world. The infinitely large, and certainly the film is talking about the cosmos within which our solar system and Earth, all of this largeness that confronts us. And then secondly, the infinitely small, our consciousness, we now penetrate down into the deep dynamics of atomic structure and the quantum world. We begin to probe into deep darkness and uncertainty. So this immensely small. And the third infinity that this scientist spoke of is, I'm quoting Teilhard de Chardin, for those of you who might want to follow. He speaks of the infinitely complex and how stimulating that is for our consciousness to reflect upon the complexity of the large and the small and of ourself in the midst of these infinities. And sometimes I find we develop this symbolic consciousness or the language to talk about the realities, and we mistake sometimes that our language, our metaphors, are the reality themselves, and we essentialize, we make our language the essence. And then we begin to realize that this is a changing world, and our language falls short at times, and we try to reach again by our creative consciousness. So we're constantly moving in this world of change to find not simply the nouns that are fixed, but rather the verbs, the sense of a changing world. And so many of our early ancestors and current indigenous or ethnic peoples, they continue to transmit stories themselves about this world. And the metaphors they use are very interesting. In the North American world, I study with Anishinaabe people, and they talk about the sound of the drum, a musical sound, or the rhythm of the drum. And in the Australian world, Aboriginal people talk about dream time, the sense of the dream as a metaphor to talk about these immensities. And Maori people talk about water and the creative dimension of the whole cosmos through the flow of water. So here we have very old traditions that have their own metaphors where they're exploring through their consciousness this reality that they're encountering. And all of them have what I think the Taoist tradition also realized, the sense of knowing the bright. So Anishinaabe people, they describe the bright with the sound of music, and Aboriginal people in Australia, the dream, the brightness of the dream, and Maori people, the brightness of the flow of water. But all of these peoples also realized with Taoism to know the bright, but hold to the dark, to be able to realize the sense of the change, the Tao as changing, unnameable, and yet we are constantly trying to name it. So these are some reflections on these immensities and consciousness in our effort to creatively relate to these immensities.
Yeah, thank you, John. John is the Taoist, as you can see, and also a scholar of indigenous traditions. And I'm sort of a Confucian, and like some of you in the questions, what can we do? You know, but we need these both, and that's why these traditions from China are so important. They balance us, they ground us, they give us a sense of action, but of awe. And I think these questions are so important because we are in the midst of the greatest changes in human history ever. And we all feel it. We know it. We feel it in our bones. It leaves me sleepless at night. What's going to be the future of children and next generations? We don't have children, but we feel our students are our children. And everything we're doing, like so many of you, is for the next generations. And the next generations of all life, the trees and flowers and plants and animals, etc. So I just want to say that if we keep this sense together, that, and it's a community sense growing around the planet, that we are part of this evolutionary process, which is new, it's fresh, it's inspiring. It's, as John said, the macrocosm, microcosm. That's exactly what Taoism is trying to help us to do, and Confucianism too. We're part of the universe, but we are the responsible continuity of Tianren Hui. We're part of the whole, but we have a responsibility for this continuity of being. And we don't know fully all the things that we have to do. So the change of consciousness, which is a spiritual change, it's a felt change, as Song Jiao said, will lead us to the appropriate actions. Americans always want to know, what can we do? But we have to go through some huge transitions right now inside of ourselves. And we're doing that, I think, to find the ways forward. So thank you for those questions. Excellent.
It's really beautiful. It's as much as an internal evolution as well as like an external transition we're going through. Some people are asking you to predict the future a little bit or foresee what's going on, and this is still related to this this evolution of consciousness. So there's one question here. You describe symbolic consciousness as the root of humanity's self-perception as Earth dominators, viewing the planet merely as a resource to be exploited. And this has led us to a point of profound ecological crisis. Do you foresee the emergence of a higher form of consciousness, one capable of generating the solutions and creativity needed for a truly harmonious and sustainable existence, where humanity becomes a positive participant in Earth evolution? And there's another question that's very similar to this, which is also quite interesting. It says, if cosmic evolution is a continuous process of creative unfolding, is it possible to view our current global crises not just as a human failure, but as a form of cosmic initiation, the universe itself working through us, struggling to achieve a new, more integrated level of planetary awareness? I feel like these questions almost respond to each other. But if you want to talk a bit about this emergence of potentially a higher form of consciousness.
So much of our work expressed in this film revolves around this idea, this concept of story, doesn't it? And the challenge of the story, the delight of the story, the playfulness of the story. And so many of us watching the film now have come to understand the arc of what we're trying to present in the film, of cosmic emergence in through our Earth solar system and through the human, and coming to this question of the degradation of the planet and the challenge that we humans have presented to the planet. But certainly we are not telling simply a horror story in Journey of the Universe. And I think many people are caught up in the sad, bad news, the doom and the gloom. But where we are moving in the film is towards the engagement with the reality of our human presence on this planet and that challenge. And to realize, as the film ends, we have 3 endings in the film. The first ending was one that I proposed. We belong here. We have always belonged here. And I think that's a very important understanding, that the challenge of what we have done is ours. It is a great revelatory challenge. The Earth is teaching us. I think one of the questions was opening that possibility, that this is an Earth cosmic challenge in recognizing. The second ending is Brian talking about the one sentence that hydrogen shaping into helium has led to all of this magnificent differentiation in the universe, this incredible understanding of the interplay of difference, subjectivity, and communion that Thomas Berry framed these ideas. And finally, the final ending that Mary Evelyn proposed, the spirit, the energies moving through us, possibly give us the possibility of renewing the face of the earth. And I think that really gives an insight into our understanding that this challenge provides new insights.
Yeah, again, these are such rich questions, and we're going to look at them later as well. And these are things we'll be pondering the rest of our life.
Yeah.
So we thank you for the depth of the questions. And, we can say these phrases from change of consciousness to conscience. That's what we're trying to evoke. And I think that means, of course, that we are in one of the greatest struggles of human history. And it's why when I came out of the 1960s here in the States and went to Asia in 71 to teach at a university there, and then traveled all through Asia, my consciousness was deeply changed by Asia, Asian religions, philosophies, traditions. And I felt this tremendous sense of cosmic connection in the gardens in different parts of Asia, Kyoto and so on. But that sense that the 60s evoked was what we're feeling now too, almost despair and disempowerment, and the revolution against the Vietnam War and the civil rights movements. But I still feel that within human cultures, we have the resilience, the wisdom of these traditions, like Confucianism and Taoism. They're imperfect, like every tradition, but they are giving us that possibility of profound reconnection. And that's why we did the project on world religions and ecology, the sense that a moral and spiritual force is needed for these changes. So right now, the largest conflicts between how we move forward in an efficacious way for the flourishing of the planet and people still denying climate change or destroying the progress that has been made. And we apologize for what's happening from our country, frankly. It's a very, very difficult and very sad time. So that's why we need the community to hold that thread that we are in some larger transformative moment. And I do feel that the second question there is Teilhard de Chardin, for example, in the middle of warfare, trench warfare of the First World War, he felt something was emerging of a larger consciousness. And his struggles, he lived in China for 20 years, part of Peking Man discovery, he saw that deep time. And that is, I feel, deep, very much what we're going through. The dark, as John said, and the light, the destruction and the creativity. So if we see that realistically, but hold on to a cosmic creativity, which is still drawing us forward, that will bring us together around the world. And it is already in a program like this.
That's really beautiful. I think between the light and the dark, and how this moment calls for us, this conscience, from consciousness to conscious, and each of us. I'm very struck by when, Mary, you mentioned your visit to Asia. Like, that's a way to actively expand our own consciousness and to connect with the cosmic consciousness from another tradition, another culture, which John also mentioned across all of these different traditions of Indigenous people. And I encourage the participant to check out the online courses and the more interviews with scientists and with Indigenous leaders. There's about 2 or 3 questions on AI. So people are asking, we're now entering into this new era with AI that's drastically changing the journey of our planet and the universe. Are we entering into a higher level of consciousness with the emergence of AI? And then some people are asking, does the development of AI break the law of the universe? So I'm curious, what is your view on artificial intelligence and how it is evolving and rapidly developing right now?
I'm intrigued by the 2 references that I hear to this development. You've mentioned AI, artificial intelligence, and the other reference is LLM, large language machines, which is attempting to refer to the fact that these machines are able to assimilate very rapidly at the speed of light incredible amounts of information, namely in language. And so these large language machines are, from that perspective, simply a rote learning at an immense complexity. The other term, artificial intelligence, raises questions about similarity to our human intelligence, but different, not having the creativity or somethings, hence the words artificial. The intelligence doesn't have the deep sincerity, I would say, or creativity of the human. And this sincerity is a very interesting concept, I think, and Thomas Berry brought this from out of his studies in Confucianism. He often used the word authenticity also to try and talk about something he encountered, especially in the Confucian tradition, that the universe, heaven, had revealed to the human something about the authenticity of the cosmos. And AI, we find by the very use of that term, there's something challenging us there. It's deeply complex, but it lacks this sincerity or authenticity that marks us as humans, whereas the other term reduces the whole problem to a machine-like. And I think the film even tries to talk about that machine-like way of knowing the world is really passing. The machine is fixed, and we now encounter a world that's very changing. So you can see between these two modes of artificial intelligence and machine-like intelligence, we humans are challenged by our sincerity, our authenticity, to find a way to relate to technology that does not become an end in itself. These forms of intelligence are tools for us to use. So I find myself not wanting to be afraid of them, but to be very careful with them.
Yeah, and I would just thank you, John. I would pick up on that as well. We can think of, we're faced with the need for principles and practicality. And again, Americans often want practical solutions, measurable solutions, and AI solutions. And wow, we just go rushing forward without the sense of what are the unintended consequences of AI for loss of jobs and all kinds of things that are really very unsettling, to put it mildly. But it's not to say, as John just said, a very dear friend called me the other day and said she learned how to take care of her pear trees better by asking AI when to prune and so on and so forth. So there's functions there that can help. But I think the deeper resources are cultural. And this is where China has a very unique contribution as the oldest continuing civilization in the world, with tremendous complex cultures of Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, indigenous tradition, minorities, etc. And this explosion around the world of an interest in culture that conveys a sense of who we are as humans and inspires us back into our deep place within nature and our deep roles in being aligned with natural systems. And again, it's why farms and botanical gardens like Kadoorie are so important, because agriculture, right? What is agriculture? It's the culture of soil and transformation, soil and water and air and seeds. This creates in our minds, again, the practical things of what we need to do, but that's a symbolic consciousness, isn't it? And Confucianism has in it, in some of the early texts, what I call botanical cultivation. And it means you kind of weed the problematic parts of yourself, the little jealousies or pettinesses and so on, and you try and bring forward that brightness that we're talking about. But it's a very botanical cultivation, so we can cultivate ourselves as well as Earth systems. And this is, I think, the value of a place like KFBG and other gardens around the world that are trying to figure out how will we feed ourselves? How will we nurture ourselves and nurture life on the planet?
Really beautiful. Thank you. And I see in the comment also Maggie from Kadori has talked about this work that's happening, whether it's protecting rare plants, whether it's actually doing education to reject despair, resilience, and through global partnerships, individual engagement. This is the planetary community that is being created. And this is, in a way, like the collective, and that collective consciousness is contributing to the brightness that you both mentioned. That's so important. There is a question about God's role in the universe, the role of God. And because you have done 10 conferences on world religion, and I think you must have lots to say about this. Yeah, what do you think about God's role in this universe?
It's a very powerful word, isn't it? Translated into many languages of the human, the sense of a unific term that can grasp very quickly the immensity of the cosmos as the creator and creation then as the cosmos. So the concept or the idea of God, it well springs out of something very profound in the human. And I would say it's a revelatory relationship. God is not simply a term. It's a relationship between the macrocosm and the microcosm. But our challenge in our time for many of us is to find accompanying language, companion language, that God is one way of speaking it. But for example, we might say God is a noun, to use that kind of grammatical exempling. And can we think about God as a verb? I encountered a South Korean theologian who uses the sense of a verb theology. And I'm reminded that of the majority of the languages on the planet, among ethnic peoples or indigenous peoples, the majority of them are verbal languages. They're languages that are flowing through ing words, participial forms. The world is doing and acting. And so that sense of recovering an idea of this unific dimension of the cosmos as differentiating all of reality and giving to that difference a unique voice, that the divine then reflects all of these processes of the unity, of the differentiation, and of the voice yearning to articulate what it is that we experience in reality.
Thank you, John. You see why we love each other so deeply, because this is a reinforcing dynamic, and we talk at breakfast, lunch, and dinner about these ideas. So it keeps the bright and dark very alive and dynamic. And I just wanted to say, what a great question. Again, we showed this film in Costa Rica, the University for Peace. And I remember well, at the back of the room, the first question was, "This is beautiful, but where is God here?" And a woman in the front jumped up and said, "Everywhere."
Haven't you been watching the film? She said.
It's in the music from the very beginning. And that's true. We tried to make the music very evocative and affective, filled with emotion. And, you know, we showed this initially on public television here in the States on PBS for 3 years. And it was very clear we didn't want to mention a word like God in the film, because there are many, many religions here. And we knew hopefully eventually we'd be showing this in different parts of the world, like this wonderful event in Hong Kong. And so we wanted this to appeal to multiple religious people, but also a younger generation for whom that word might not work well, or people who are a little averse to religion. And here's the sensibility. I'll use language from China. You know, this film is talking about the Tao that moves through all things, which is a dynamic force beyond naming, right? And why is the Tao Te Ching one of the most translated books on the planet? along with the Bible, of course, but one of the most read texts everywhere, the Tao Te Ching, because it has this sense of the passive creativity of water and so on, of the feminine, which I think is really arising everywhere. But I love, I never actually use the word God, but I love this sense that within all of these creative processes, I mean, we're still discovering, how did the universe emerge, right? The great flaring forth. How did galaxies emerge? We spent a semester teaching at Princeton where the leading scientists on universe and galaxies are there. They admit we still don't fully know. We are bathed in mystery. We are immersed in the unknown, and yet we can feel and be moved by emergent processes that are self-organizing. And that's part of the film, self-organizing dynamic processes that are patterned. That's the Li. The Li and the Qi are very much in this film. And at the end, we say, what if we imagine ourselves as the mind and heart of the universe? That's the Xin. That's the mind and heart from China. So this is a dynamic, unfolding universe story of which we are the mind and heart. And that is the Tao. It's present in both Confucianism and Taoism and inspires people around the world.
And just a short comment, also this beautiful concept or a position in the Islamic tradition of Allah, and they speak of 99 names. And I'm always struck by the fact that they didn't go to 100 or they didn't conjecture, but rather it's not fixed. It's not that perfect. There is something always to be added to the 99. So even in that tradition, the recognition of complexity and process.
That is beautiful. Actually, yeah, in Chinese tradition, 9 is the largest number. You can never go to 10 because it will be too full and it's overfilling. But with 9, there is that not knowing at the end. There's always that potential. And I feel like that's also where the great mystery exists, where that creativity exists, where the sense of wonder and the awe, that in kind of never quite reaching the limit and always leaving space for imagination.
Yes.
We are getting to the last 5 minutes, and I want to wrap 3 questions in one, but they are kind of related. You know, there are lots of questions about what we should do. And this one particularly about in the office setting, kind of in the urban environment, what can we do? And there's a second question about how could we send more positive energies to our Mother Earth, to the suffering, the degradation that is happening. And then the last one, how can we embrace authenticity and connect with the consciousness of the universe to bring more light into the future of the Earth? So all about what can we do and how do we do that? So yeah, any last recommendations, Mary and John, on how do we do it? How do we do it in our daily life? How do we send positive energy? And how do we really embrace this authenticity and this consciousness of the universe and really embody that?
In our most recent trips to China, we have been exploring with some of the members of our team the striking and profound archaeological sites like Liangzhu, these sites which reveal to the Chinese people the depth of their past, the complexity of their ancestral contributions and creativity. And one of the insights that I find archaeologists talking about is revisiting these separations that we make between, say, urban and rural, or the forest and the city as deprived of nature, and nature is not developed, or it has something without. We need to find the interweaving of the human, that where we live is no longer separated by the walls of the city, no longer separated by the ideas associated, say, with Gilgamesh and this very old story of the ruler of a city, very patriarchal, dominating force, which goes to the forest to devour the forest and to simply use, if not abuse, the forest. And all of these old ideas of separating, we recognize them, we revisit them, and we now move into different ways of understanding place-based knowledge. Wherever we are on the earth. We have created homes and places that are built of the earth, and we are returning to this understanding. Thomas Berry would use the phrase ecozoic age, the age in which the human reconnects with the voices of the earth and begins to realize that we are woven through our own voice into the voices of the earth.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so many things to say. Again, you know, I come back to place-based, and some people are talking about the office and so on. You know, I'm from New York originally, New York City, and I went to Columbia for my PhD, and I love New York and the Hudson River on one side, East River on another, Central Park. You can walk down streets where ginkgo trees, which are, you know, from China originally, and sycamore trees are absolutely blooming with life. So I think even in a city, we can draw in this chi of nature. And it's why, again, KFBG is such a sanctuary for people. But, you know, Beijing now has 49% of Beijing is forests or parks. And that is a feat that is unbelievable. We're going to be talking this week with a webinar on ecological civilization in China. And a Chinese scientist who's here at Yale is going to talk about the forest that she's been working on for 20 years in Beijing. So I do think urban ecology is growing, how we live in cities and can still feed our souls, our chi, our spirit, et cetera, is very, very important. And the other thing is, I think this return to the earth is calling us to return to its livingness, because that paradigm coming out of Enlightenment thinking in the West, that a dead, inanimate universe is how we study it empirically and all that. When empiricism, a scientific method, becomes a worldview, that is a problem. And that's the problem we're facing. But I can just say, to conclude here, this Living Earth Community website that we're going to be releasing with 300 resources of books, of articles, of media, and so on, is all over the internet here in the States. This notion of the earth, of Gaia, of relating to it, of practices, how we relate to it, which you were doing today at Kadoorie, is exploding because of our alienation, has been so great. So for example, there's a conference at Harvard this spring of thinking with plants and fungi. 250 people were there, including us. 1,500 were listening online. This is the return to the living earth community that's taking place here in the West, but in Asia as well. And that's part of our partnership as bridges to one another, creating this new community, life community.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mary and John. I will let you rest for a moment before I come back to you for your final words. So I would like to invite you to say something, you know, as our audience leave Kadoorie tonight and walk into the streets of Hong Kong, or as our online participants drop off Zoom and go back to their real life, you know, what would be the final words you want to say to them? So now I will go into some announcements, and then I'll come back for your conclusion, last words for people. So please scan this QR code to share your feedback for this talk, and any further comments or reflections, we will share them with Mary and John. And as they mentioned, these questions and these comments and feedback as to the richness of how we can all adapt and learn as to this body of work and this research that is being done. So please fill out this questionnaire. And also, as Mary mentioned, there is a talk on August 28th on ecological civilization that's hosted by the Garrison Institute. We will share that in the email along with the recording of today's events. And also there will be a next talk about on Kadori Earth programming. So this will be in October 22nd. So this talk is on loving the land, how agriculture and ecological integrity can coexist. Actually, Mary and John also mentioned a lot about this, about agriculture. So you will dive deeper into Kadori's practice from Kadori's own speakers who are working on regenerative agriculture and on conservation. So this talk will emphasize the importance of the rural land in the global context, and specifically in Hong Kong, and how this can bring learning to all around the world. And this talk will be in Cantonese with translation into English. And also very importantly, this talk in October will kick off the 70th anniversary of KFBG. So that's 7 decades of this work and bringing into more ecological abundance and resources conservation into this world. So from now on until the end of 2026, there will be a lot of different lively and in-depth exchange, just drawing on KFBG's vast body of practice in the past 70 years. So that's the announcements about what is to come. And thanks everyone so much again for joining. And this talk will also be available on social media with subtitles. So please feel free to share with your friends and colleagues to help spread the message. And I also really want to thank our friends in person at Kadori and also online joining us, especially the organizing team, Juliana, Seaman, Jamie, and the translators working so hard. And Josephine for convening us, and it's lovely to see everyone also in person there. So now I will give it back to Mary and John to conclude.
We wanted to come and be with you at this time in solidarity. Mm-hmm. We are going through a difficult time now in our country where we are struggling to find our voice against forces that want to move in directions that seemingly shut down life or stop life. But we find joining our voice with yours restores us also in our struggle to move forward and to find ways to talk across the divides that trouble our country and that trouble the world also. We need to find that voice that comes from the earth and that we are also from the earth, and to speak again about that which joins us together in a loving journey forward into our universe.
Beautiful, John. Yes. Fortunately, we feel with people like you, the struggle will make us all stronger, and we will have an even deeper kinship and love, loving the land. I love that in the KFGB logo. And I just want to give that love back to all of you, those who are sitting there, those of you who are online, the work that you're doing. Song Jiao, you did such a marvelous job moderating.
Yes.
Josephine, again, and your team, and Song Shin Lin, and the translating. There's so much to do together, I think, and that's what's very exciting. And let me just end. A number of you have said the Cosmic Walk that Stephen Harding has done and so on. But I want to just bring it back to right here in New York at the Natural History Museum. There's a huge hall of the universe that you can walk down and experience what it is to be in deep time. There's a beautiful hall of the earth that shows life coming from the vents in the ocean and so on. There's a magnificent hall of biodiversity showing us the explosion of life in the last 65 million years. And recently added in the last couple of years is a hall called Invisible Worlds, of what's happening, of the connection of things. So this story is available, you see, in one of the great natural history museums and in your own as well, around the world. This story is empowering people. Children go through these exhibits, and that's the empowerment that we're sharing together, we're creating together, and gratitude and love abounds from this program to our hearts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mary and John, and thank you again for joining us. It's not even 9 a.m. in New Haven yet, and Mary and John has passed through so much love to us across the Pacific. And also, we have received this message from the movie. And I think with this connection to the universe and to the more than human, may everyone who has been tonight's program also spread this connection, the love to the community around you. So thanks so much, and thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and please stay in touch and perhaps see you next time. And follow Mary and John's whereabouts. They travel a lot, they come to Asia, and perhaps you'll catch them at the next in-person event. So yeah, all the best and good night everyone joining from Asia.
Till next time.